Tonight, long-standing opponents find a shared vision on a path to a new pipeline. What's in the deal?
This is Alberta's moment of opportunity.
The clash with BC.
We need to make sure that this project doesn't become an energy vampire.
And what Stephen Guilbeault is saying about his decision to resign from Mark Carney's cabinet. New details into the shocking shooting blocks from the White House.
She was savagely attacked. She's dead.
What we are learning about the victims and the suspect's connection to the CIA.
The subject had a relationship in Afghanistan with partner forces.
And a spillover from American alcohol.
We want to get rid of it.
What it's worth and what one province is doing to get rid of it for a good cause.
CTV National News with Omar Sachedina.
Good evening. Two traditional foes, Alberta and Ottawa, found common ground today on an energy deal that could pave the way for a new pipeline. But as the Prime Minister gets closer to one province, it appears he may be agitating another, British Columbia, and also parts of his inner circle. Stephen Guilbeault today resigning from Mark Carney's cabinet, accusing the Prime Minister of dismantling elements of the climate action plan he worked on as Environment Minister. Carney writing that while we may have differing views at times on how exactly we make essential progress, I'm glad Stephen will continue to offer his important perspectives as an MP in our Liberal caucus. We have extensive coverage tonight on that memorandum of understanding between Ottawa and Alberta and the resignation, beginning with our senior political correspondent, Mike Couture. Mike.
Omar, the former Environment Minister, cited today's MOU as the reason for his decision. That's according to a statement that Guilbeault released today. It reads in part, "Despite this difficult economic context, I remain one of those for whom environmental issues must remain front and center. That is why I strongly oppose the Memorandum of Understanding between the federal government and the government of Alberta." And all of this came just hours after that deal was signed. Danielle Smith's excitement could not be contained. Alberta isn't getting a bitumen pipeline yet, but it is one step closer.
This agreement includes a clear path to the construction of an over 1 million barrel per day Indigenous co-owned bitumen pipeline to Asian markets.
If everything goes smoothly, senior government officials say construction could start in 2029. But there's one important caveat.
If there's not a private sector component, there won't be a pipeline.
That's just one of the conditions as laid out in the agreement, as is Indigenous co-ownership and collaboration with BC to share the benefits. There has to be a new carbon pricing agreement, and the Pathways Carbon Capture project must move forward for the pipeline to do the same.
I don't know that the Prime Minister would have agreed to a new bitumen pipeline without Pathways, and we wouldn't have agreed to Pathways without a new bitumen pipeline.
The carbon storage program is key to Canada meeting its commitment of achieving net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. The federal Conservatives are criticizing the process, saying the Prime Minister could push this ahead using existing legislation.
We even supported him, gives him the power to approve it. So we only need him to do one thing for this pipeline to happen. Get out of the way.
Now, Alberta has until July 1st to submit a pipeline project application to the new Major Projects Office. If all of the conditions are met, then the federal government will make an adjustment to the oil tanker ban on the coast of BC. Omar?
All right, Mike, thank you. In BC, meanwhile, the Premier is calling the project a distraction, and coastal First Nations suggesting the pipeline is a pipe dream. CTV's BC Bureau Chief Andrew Johnson has the reaction.
Flanked by his flag-waving caucus, BC Premier David Eby responded today to the pipeline deal he was left out of for a project he calls fictional.
No proponent, no route, no money, no First Nation support. We need to make sure that this project doesn't become an energy vampire.
Eby labels the deal a drain on federal resources, a distraction from real projects, and missing critical consultation.
The first step, in my opinion, that has to happen is that the Prime Minister needs to sit down with coastal First Nations.
Coastal First Nations are clear in their opposition to a project they say could destroy their way of life.
We'll do everything in our power to protect our coast, from a real threat of an oil spill. There is no technology that can clean up an oil spill. We will never consent to allowing oil tankers in our coastal waters.
The reaction from Northwest BC, the region also already at the center of multiple LNG and mining projects, is, according to one mayor, mixed.
People definitely want to see growth. We want to see economic activity. We want to see the communities flourish. The one thing about a pipe is, and this project right now that has me a bit concerned is I see BC taking all the risk and Alberta getting all the reward. So how do we line those up?
Public opinion in BC, according to a recent survey, is tilted towards supporting a new pipeline, but First Nations may have the final say. And as we've seen before in this province, if they are unwilling to sign on, a new pipeline may never materialize. Andrew Johnson, CTV News, Vancouver.
And joining us now is CTV's chief political correspondent, Vashi Kapelos. Vashi, the two sides today, Ottawa and Alberta, agreed there needs to be a private sector proponent for this project, but the price of oil has dropped. And so what's the business case here for anyone to even invest in a pipeline?
Well, that's the multi-billion-dollar question, Omar, right? Will there be a private proponent that comes forward? The business case at this point is kind of twofold. First of all, the International Energy Agency says demand for oil will continue to rise through 2050 now, and especially in Asia. The second business case is more of a national imperative to wean ourselves off of dependence on the U.S. as our primary export market. Sending more oil to Asia is going to help Canada do that.
Now, as we mentioned earlier, today's agreement prompted Stephen Guilbeault to resign from Carney's cabinet today. Are you hearing there are others who feel that the government isn't doing enough to champion the environment, and are they too considering leaving?
Yeah, I think the Prime Minister and the people closest to him are going to face an issue with other people in caucus, and in cabinet who care a lot about climate. Chief among them was Stephen Guilbeault. The fact that he quit is not a small deal from both a pragmatic and most especially a political perspective. He was also, remember, the Prime Minister's lieutenant in Quebec. And so I think there is a very real possibility, based on the conversations I'm having, that there could be more shoes to drop. So we'll have to keep our eyes peeled for that, Omar.
All right, Vashi, thank you. The 20-year-old National Guard member who was shot in Washington near the White House has died of her injuries. And there are new details emerging about the suspect, an Afghan national who worked with the CIA. Here's CTV's Judy Trin.
The shooting of two National Guards is being investigated as terrorism. The suspect, Ramanullah Lakhanwal, was also shot. Officials say the 29-year-old drove across the country from Washington state, where he lived with his wife and 5 children.
There is confirmation now that the subject had a relationship in Afghanistan with partner forces. We are fully investigating that aspect of his background.
Lakhanwal, an Afghan national, was trained and equipped by the CIA to fight against the Taliban. After 2 decades of war against al-Qaeda, former President Joe Biden ordered the military to withdraw from the region. Lakhanwal was among the thousands of people American forces evacuated from Afghanistan in 2021. He was granted asylum earlier this year.
We're not going to put up with these kind of assaults on law and order by people who shouldn't even be in our country.
The U.S. has announced that immigration requests of Afghans would be stopped indefinitely, pending a review of security vetting. 500 more National Guards will now be deployed to D.C., joining the 2,000 soldiers already patrolling the city. 24-year-old Andrew Wolf remains in critical condition, but 20-year-old Sarah Beckstrom, who was shot in the head and chest, has died.
She's no longer with us. She's looking down at us right now. Her parents are with her.
Lakhanwal will now be charged with murder, along with multiple counts of assault with intent to kill. The Trump administration says it will pursue the death penalty. Omar.
All right, Judy, thank you. To Hong Kong now, where the worst fire in decades has now killed at least 94 people and more than 200 are still missing. The fire at the apartment complex is now set to be under control, with search and rescue operations about to conclude. 3 construction company executives have been arrested on suspicion of manslaughter and negligence for allegedly using unsafe materials that may have fueled the deadly fire. Back in this country, a new warning about sex trafficking as calls for help from victims hit an all-time high last year. CTV's Adrian Gobriel on how the most vulnerable are being targeted.
Forced into sex work, criminals preyed on Tamia Nagy's vulnerability.
You work 20 hours days. You mainly perform sexual services. You could serve up to 10, 15 clients a day. I was lucky enough that I started out in a strip joint.
Living in poverty in 1998 in Budapest, Hungary, as a 21-year-old, she traveled to Toronto after answering a newspaper ad posted for an overseas nanny.
It was very clear in a very short period of time that the agency is not a real agency. It was an international human trafficking ring.
The Canadian Human Trafficking Hotline received just over 5,100 calls in 2024, an all-time high. A similar number is expected by the end of this year as well.
We need every province in Canada to adapt an anti-human trafficking strategy.
Individuals aren't just being forced into the sex trade. The United Nations has called Canada's temporary worker program a breeding ground for contemporary slavery.
They're using tactics like fear, intimidation, threats, sometimes physical violence and abuse.
Families are also being warned of children being lured through direct messages while playing games on electronic devices.
Young boys, they can also actually be trafficked. Just educate yourself. You don't think it makes a huge difference, but I'm telling you, knowledge is the key.
Nagy was able to escape and has dedicated her life to save someone else from having to walk in her shoes. If you're watching this and believe that you may be a victim or you're concerned about the well-being of someone you know, please call the Canadian Human Trafficking Hotline or your local Victim Services Centre. Adrian Gover, CTV News, Toronto.
Fresh outrage in Quebec tonight, where the province has just tabled a new bill adding to the province's crackdown on religious expression. Here's CTV's Quebec Bureau Chief Geneviève Beauchemin on what it covers.
Quebec is escalating its crackdown on religion in the public sphere. It tabled Bill 9, which covers bans on public prayers and on face coverings from daycare to university, from students to educators. It also prohibits public institutions like hospitals from exclusively offering halal or kosher foods.
We think that when the state is neutral, Quebecers are free.
Some religious and civil liberties groups disagree. They call measures like a ban on organized prayers on streets and in parks without approval of municipalities a radical infringement on rights and freedoms. The polls have shown more support for the measure in Quebec than anywhere else in Canada. The secularism bill also aims to shut down university prayer rooms, including Concordias, where such a space has existed since the 1970s. The Muslim Student Association says the ban would close the door to a safe space where hundreds of students gather every single day.
It's them trying to figure out to fix a problem of extremism, which is, as Quebecers, we're all against it. But is removing such places that haven't caused any harms fixing any of these problems? I don't think so.
The government says all religious expression is equal under the law.
We have the same rules applying to everyone, to every school, to every people.
But the impact, says Dana Noor Ballantyne with the Concordia Student Union, disproportionately affects Muslim women.
People really shouldn't assume that this is going to stop with the bill that we're facing today. Like, in 5 years, am I going to be allowed to wear the hijab at all?
Quebec plans to invoke the notwithstanding clause to shield the law from a charter challenge. Geneviève Beauchemin, CTV News, Montreal.
Candidates vying to take over the leadership of the federal NDP party went toe-to-toe tonight in a French language debate in Montreal that also featured lots of English.
But we're getting squeezed while billionaires are cashing in.
We need to approach this at all levels from every way we can, including a guaranteed livable basic income.
The cost of living is not an issue. It's an emergency. And it's an emergency caused by market failure.
The cost of living right now for Canadians is skyrocketing, and people in Canada are struggling right now.
I've been listening to speeches and great ideas like the ones we've just heard for over 45 years.
And CTV's Jeremy Charon is in Montreal tonight. Jeremy, speaking French seemed to be a challenge tonight.
Omar, this was the first big test for all 5 candidates vying for the federal NDP leadership position. And the biggest test of the evening for all of these candidates was the fact this was a French debate, billed as such by the NDP party, expected to be 60% French, 40% English. would have appeared to have been more of a bilingual debate, but that was advantageous for all of the candidates, none of which are bilingual, all of which admit they are working to improve their French language skills at a time when the party is hoping to boost its numbers in Quebec. Of course, they did not have a good performance in the last election. They only have one sitting Quebec MP, and they are hopeful that regaining support in Quebec can help them rebound in the next election. There was also a lot of talk during this debate about other paths to rebuilding this party, and that includes regaining the vote of the working class, a union vote, if you will, a vote that they lost during the last election, mostly to the Conservative Party. So those were two key things that we're focused on tonight, the French language, of course, being one of them, and regaining support in Quebec, and also trying to regain the votes of the working class people. Omar?
Jeremy, thank you. Coming up, what's behind the rise in market manipulation and what's being done to stop it? Cases of market manipulation are on the rise as regulators try to keep up with deceptive tactics, making some people millions and robbing others. As W5's John Woodward tells us, advocates are pushing for new measures to protect investors.
Randy Manzardo spends his retirement in Coquitlam, BC gardening. His tomatoes are growing fast. His stocks, not so much. His retirement plans are in jeopardy.
It's disheartening and it made me a bit angry.
He invested tens of thousands in one stock in particular, Quantum Biopharma, believing their drug for multiple sclerosis showed great promise in mice.
When they put these announcements out about how good this was, it would drop. And I've done enough investing that when there's a great announcement, it doesn't drop, it goes up.
Randy thought something was up, and so did the people at Quantum Biopharma. They've sued Canadian banks, alleging their stocks were driven down by a market manipulation tactic known as stock spoofing, demanding $700 million in compensation. The banks have denied this.
Quantum is just an example of what's happened to the whole sector.
Terry Lynch is the CEO of Save Canadian Markets. He believes spoofing is on the rise. Players using computer programs or algorithms he calls algos, faking orders by the thousands to drive stocks down. They profit, he says, by short selling, essentially a bet that a stock will drop.
And it's just they just have algos making, $1,000 here and $500 there and $300 there, and you make it on 200 companies. It adds up to real money over time.
Stock spoofing prosecutions in the United States show that techniques that were cutting edge just a few years ago have now become much easier to do at scales never before imagined. American authorities have been busy. The largest settlement so far, J.P. Morgan Chase paid $920 million to settle allegations of hundreds of thousands of fake orders. They're also prosecuting Canadians operating there. That includes an alleged stock manipulation case of an Ontario man, Alexander Milrud, whose network in Korea was allegedly making more than $1 million a month. And TD Bank paid more than $20 million to resolve charges relating to a former trader's alleged actions. Spoofing is illegal in Canada. Records show the number of proceedings against so-called market manipulators has doubled from just 5 in 2022 to 10 last year. But in that time, total fines never rose above $1.05 million.
What we need is the court systems to send some messages out there to say, hey, we need to stop this, you need to be punished, and now you need to get reform.
Lynch believes another way to stop spoofing is to take the profit out. He's pushing for restrictions on short selling. A report for the Ontario government recommended some short-selling restrictions. That was 5 years ago. It's still in progress. We caught up with Ontario's finance minister.
Where are we on those recommendations and protecting investors?
We expect all market participants to follow the rules.
You might be aware of a lawsuit that alleges even some of the big banks were engaging in some predatory practices like stock spoofing. I mean, is it so widespread that even the big players are doing this?
Look, we have enforcement and everyone's got to follow the rules. I'm not going to comment on anything in front of tribunals or courts right now. But make no mistake, we are always there to protect the good actors and go after the bad actors.
Over in BC, Randy appreciates the sentiment, but he doesn't feel he can compete.
It's such an uneven playing field for an average guy like me.
He's hoping his quantum stock turns around because he's not sure he wants to take another risk with his retirement.
W5's John Woodward. Still ahead. What's happening to all that American booze yanked off Canadian shelves? Nova Scotia is planning to sell off all the American alcohol it pulled off store shelves as part of the trade dispute with the U.S.
There's no profit to be had for the province of Nova Scotia in selling this at this point in time. This is like, we want to get rid of it.
$14 million worth of U.S. alcohol is currently sitting in storage in Nova Scotia. Net profits from the sale will go to community food organizations like Feed Nova Scotia. In Ontario, $80 million worth of U.S. alcohol that was pulled is sitting in storage, and $2 million worth of that could expire within the next 7 months, according to the province. Still ahead, why the public is getting a rare look at the history inside a famed East Coast basilica. The new owners of a storied basilica on the East Coast are taking the church in a new direction, and not just for the faithful. CTV's Garrett Barry explains.
One of the oldest collections in all of Newfoundland and Labrador.
Most people, when they come in here, they are blown away. They don't know it exists.
Bishop Thomas Mullick's library holds books in 9 languages, many subjects. Some of these titles date back to the 16th century. The Cathedral Basilica Foundation, the new owners of this property, have taken on the task of bringing this space to a new generation. It's the centerpiece of their reimagined basilica property.
Our goal is to see this place buzzing, to see people coming and going, to bringing life and creating new stories.
So this space is no longer the Archbishop's Palace, it's now the Palace Commons. This foundation bought the basilica and these associated properties in 2024. The Roman Catholic Archdiocese was forced to sell this church and all of its other holdings to pay abuse victims, after Newfoundland and Labrador's Court of Appeal found the Archdiocese was responsible for abuse by the Christian Brothers at the Mount Cashel Boys' Home Orphanage.
In terms of the purchase of the property, I think we got an enormous amount of support from the public.
The history is deep. Church construction was finished in 1855. There were only about 20,000 people in the city. Its new owners are promising to keep the parish alive. It's getting rent from the Catholic Church, but there's plenty of expenses in a building like this.
63 stained glass fixtures in the building, most of which were put there over a 45-year period between the mid-1800s and the early 1900s.
Not everything is being revealed just yet, but part of the plan is to seek long-term tenants, community groups, arts groups, music groups, to bring a new kind of life into this space. Omar.
Fascinating. Garrett, thank you. That's a snapshot of this Thursday. John Veneveli Rao is in tomorrow. For all of us at CTV National News, thank you for watching and good night.